Today I'll be discussing the Motorball arc of Battle Angel Alita, comprising chapters 13 through 22 of the manga, making it the second longest arc in the whole series and about twice the length of those I've covered so far. If you've watched my old chapter reviews, you probably have already heard my mixed feelings about this arc. The first time I read this manga, I was so disappointed by the start of this arc that I put it aside for months before finishing it. I leave most of my thoughts for the end, but Alita's behavior is kind of erratic and not well developed in the first half, in my opinion. You'll see what I mean, or if you don't, I'll explain it at the end. Let's get right to it then. To set the stage, in the past arc, Alita was working as a hunter-warrior in the scrapyard, basically a bounty hunter, living with her caretaker, Dr. Ito. In the course of her work, she met a scrappy young scavenger named Yugo, who quickly became her first love as she admired his dreams for the future. But Yugo was involved in shady dealings that ultimately came back to bite him, along with being targeted by Alita's own enemies, leading Yugo to make a mad dash to reach the floating city Zalem above the scrapyard. Despite her best efforts to talk him down, Yugo is killed by Zalem's defenses, leaving Alita devastated. That leads us to the opening of this arc. We begin in one of many dilapidated corners of the scrapyard, 1 month after those events. A disheveled Dr. Ito is showing around a holographic image of Alita, but nobody has seen her. It seems our warrior girl has gone missing since Yugo's death. She just up and left one day without saying a word. Ito has put his business and entire life on hold to go look for her, finding himself in this western sector of the scrapyard unfamiliar to him. As Ito looks for a place to bed down for the night, he walks by the disturbing scene of a girl being attacked in an alley. After confirming it isn't Alita, Ito starts to walk on by, but his better nature eventually wins out. Grabbing a nearby pole with a piece of concrete on the end, Ito introduces himself by jabbing the would-be rapist right in the rear end. Thankfully, they aren't cyborgs, so Ito is able to beat the hell out of them. The girl throws her arms around Ito in gratitude, introducing herself as Shumira. She is very excited and bubbly considering what just almost happened to her. She also speaks of herself in the third person, oddly. This character is a little controversial, mostly due to some things that will happen later, but in any case, she is very into Ito. Shumira immediately offers to take him to her home and serve him dinner if he doesn't have a place to stay. Ito agrees that she's awfully trusting for someone that just got attacked, but instead of answering, asks if she's seen Alita. That gives Shumira pause as she asks whether this is Ito's girlfriend. He assures her that's not the case, but wonders exactly what their relationship is. Nonetheless, that answer works for Shumira, who immediately drags a very confused Ito along to a racetrack of sorts. Motorball. This is a sport played by cyborg players as they fight over a motorized ball going around a track. The player in possession at the end of the race wins. Shumira gives Ito a ticket for something, and he's directed to monitoring stations downstairs. He loses track of Shumira in the crowd, but decides to go along with this for now. The ticket leads him to a headset that will allow him to view the race from the perspective of one of the players, in this case, number 57, Bardiche. Ito is almost immediately overwhelmed by the experience, suddenly finding himself in the middle of a high-speed battle raging at 300 kilometers per hour. It's clear at the outset that this is every bit as much of a blood sport as the Colosseum back in the eastern sector. Bardiche takes a break from the action for a pit stop, during which one of his crew warns him to watch out for that one rookie. He then bashes the current ball holder with a flail and takes possession, but there's one player standing between him and the finish line, number 99. Ito gasps as the announcer tells us this is the Angel of Slaughter that showed up out of nowhere just 2 weeks earlier. Of course, we know her as Alita. She easily dodges Bardish's attack and takes him out of commission, cutting off Ito's feed. Alita takes possession of the ball and steps across the finish line, securing her victory. Ito pushes his way through the crowds to get to the service area and finds his way to a grate so he can get a glimpse of Alita, calling out to her desperately. She turns and only gives him a cold look that stuns the doctor. Security finds Ito and tosses him out while Alita walks away without a word. It seems like every Motorball player has their own RV-style mobile garage, which Alita has returned to. Her Motorball body disassembles, leaving her as mostly a disembodied head. We meet Alita's mechanic, a little man named Umba, that compliments Alita for winning 4 matches before he's even had time to fine-tune her Motorball body. Such a body is called, and pardon my German pronunciation, a Wetzeug, a racing body with speed and power regulated by Motorball rules. We also meet Alita's manager, a former Motorball player named Ed, who has the shakes. There's also this weird little fuzzball creature with one eye that has apparently become Alita's pet, named Kinji. Ed has been having trouble finding a sponsor for Alita, but he isn't worried with her winning streak. He remarks on how things just tend to fall into your lap sometimes, referencing how he found Alita bawling her eyes out at a pub before talking her into Motorball, much to Alita's annoyance since she made him promise not to talk about that. Alita questions Umba about why he constructed her Wetzeug with a feminine body shape. He gives 3 reasons: 'cause she's a woman, it makes sense for the lightweight, high-speed design of the frame, and the crowd loves it. Alita reflects on her reasons for joining Ed. After what happened with Yugo, she just wanted to forget everything. That's why she left Ito and put her berserker body away into storage, a way of putting aside her memories, both good and bad, so she can become a piece of steel, a razor's edge. Meanwhile, Ito is tossed out onto the street. Recovering, he crumples up the image of Alita in a bout of frustration with how much she has clearly changed. She doesn't seem like the Alita he knows. Shumira finds him shortly, showing concern for his injuries. After giving a vague answer about whether he found the girl he was looking for, Shumira cheerily reiterates her invitation to take him home and cook for him. She likes the company since her older brother is rarely home, which prompts Shumira to exclaim that since Ito is a doctor, he might be able to help her brother. Ito is confused since he never mentioned being a doctor, but she points to the mark on his head and says it means he's a doctor. Before he can contemplate the implications of this, Shumira points to a poster exclaiming that this is her brother, Jashugan, the Motorball champion. She's very proud of him. We skip a bit of time to find ourselves back at the track, where a whole crowd of motorballers are embroiled in a carnage-filled pileup. We also find out the reason it's called Motorball, as the ball itself has motors in it that cause it to spin erratically, making it hard to keep a grip on and predict. Alita scoops up the loose ball. She recalls Ed remarking on her desire to be pure steel, noting that the purer the steel, the more fragile it is. Another player tries to come up on Alita from behind, but she quickly slashes behind her with her new weapon. This is the Damascus blade, supposedly forged by the greatest bladesmith to ever live using a variety of alloys from material found in the scrapyard. Armed with this blade, Alita is confronted with 3rd League champion Armored Togo, number 62. He's a kendo-themed motorballer with a sword hand. Togo unleashes the full force of the Jigen School's Cloud Gleam strike, but Alita and her Damascus blade are too fast and too strong for him. She speeds past the swordsman in a burst of sparks. First his blade falls in 2 pieces, then his head follows suit. Alita crosses the finish line for her 5th straight victory. The chapter ends with a final thought. The impurities breathe life into the steel. The implications here are pretty clear with the steel metaphor, which is that Alita is probably on the wrong track with her desire to purge herself of the past and become pure steel. This is a lesson she's going to have to learn, one assumes. Let's stop for a moment to explain Motorball. The author lays it all out in the back of the volume. First of all, Motorball is managed by the Factory, the bureaucratic and enforcement apparatus that effectively governs the scrapyard for the benefit of the floating city Zalem. Motorball is popular in the western sector of the scrapyard, while in the east, coliseum battles between massive cyborgs, as briefly seen in previous arcs, are the big entertainment draw. With 10 different tracks in the western sector, Motorball is actually a major industry in the scrapyard, with a lot of money and jobs created by it. Starting at the bottom of the Motorball pyramid, you have the Amateur League, which is mostly unofficial races held on the streets by those who couldn't hack it in the official leagues. Then there's the Third League, which is where Alita has been slicing her way to victory so far. The most wildly popular tier is Second League, due to the high skill and powerful personalities at play. You can think of it like a cross between NASCAR and professional wrestling, except all the carnage is real, deadly, and part of the appeal. However, the top league is where you'll find the most skilled and deadly racers. Only 50 players are allowed in the top league at one time, and the races are broadcast to Zalem itself. Scoring is partially determined by viewership on each player's feed, so players are incentivized to put on a show. Players are outfitted with transmitters that relay their field of view both back to their pit crews and to special monitor stations the likes of which Ito used in this case. Apparently, people getting robbed while engrossed in the feed is a common problem. Anyways, as to the actual rules of Motorball, there are 8 basic rules. First, whoever maintains possession of the Motorball over a set number of laps and reaches the finish wins. I'll clarify that it's the number of laps the ball makes, not the number of laps the player does that are counted. Second, the track is one way only. Intentional reversing of more than 3 meters is subject to penalty. Third, stopping on the track for more than a minute is an automatic disqualification. Fourth, if the Motorball goes off the track or loses functionality, play is temporarily halted until the new ball is introduced. Fifth, handheld weapons, flying, shooting weapons, spraying, radiating weapons, and exploding weapons are prohibited. I originally thought Togo, the Third League champion that Alita just fought, was breaking this rule, but his sword is actually built into his hand, so it's fine. Sixth, fighting in the pits is instant disqualification. Seventh, the ball keeper cannot enter the pit. Lastly, a special rule: if there are only 2 players in an active state on the track, this prompts a showdown to accentuate the one-on-one competition. In a showdown, rules 1 to 4 no longer apply. At that point, it's basically a duel and the ball doesn't matter. With the rules covered, let's move right on with the story about a week after Ito found Alita at the Motorball track. Ito is in the middle of regressing to his more unpleasant character traits, a mix of controlling jealousy and spite. He isn't taking Alita's rejection and apparent abandonment of him well. He didn't do anything wrong, after all. Thankfully, Shimira yanks him out of his spiral to make sure they see the start of her brother's race. Despite staying at Shimira's place for the past week, Ito still hasn't seen her brother once. Ito is confused that Jashigan is racing despite supposedly being sick, but Shimira doesn't provide much explanation. Alita and Ed are also at this race, aiming to get a look at what top league competition is like. Kimji, that little one-eyed ball of fluff from earlier, is along for the ride. Or at least he is until he takes off on his own, apparently taking a liking to Shimira, who would like to have him, though Alita refuses. The event starts before Alita and Ito have a chance to notice each other. The crowd erupts in wild cheers for number 0, the Emperor of the Motorball League, Jashigan. Astonishingly, he's going into this race with 2 handicaps in the name of fair play. First, he's only using one arm, and second, this is a 3-on-1 match. His opponents are number 49, Claymore, number 87, Pihaka-Eda, and number 6, Kalashnikov. Each one of them is in the top 10 rankings of the top league. This is also Jashigan's first time on the track in over a month, so this seems to be his idea of a warm-up. Alita is a bit shocked by all this, but Ed assures her this is just how Jashigan rolls. The racers do a warm-up lap, and then the ball is released. Instead of scrambling for the ball, though, the three challengers launch a three-way attack on Jashigan. They hit nothing but air as Jashigan easily evades them, snatching up the ball in the process. The crowd goes wild. Alita admits his agility is incredible, but so is hers. He isn't that special. Ed tells her that she'll see what he can really do when he starts using his Maschinenkratz, or machine fist. It's a cyborg martial art not unlike Alita's own Panzerkunst, and it's why Jashigan has a perfect and undefeated record. That record suddenly seems in danger when the champion has some kind of fit, abruptly toppling over like someone flipped a switch. He tumbles and his opponents scoop up the ball, though they're too afraid to attack him again. Eventually he drags himself upright and makes his way to the pit, leaning on the fence all the way. He has to get back on the track within 10 minutes or he'll be disqualified. Ito's instincts as a doctor kick in, and he immediately starts scaling the fence with Shumira, determined to save her brother. Alita is surprised to see him. After knocking out a guard with a pipe, and unfortunately starting a trend as a whole crowd of people start scaling the fences, Ito and Shumira make it over to the pits where Jashigan's team recognizes her. She explains that Ito has the doctor mark, and he quickly takes charge of the champion's care. They explain that Jashigan has been experiencing these bizarre fits where his brain activity basically flatlines. Before, he's always recovered on his own in moments, but not this time. It's been a full minute and they can't get a reaction out of him. They've told him he should retire, but Jashigan refuses to forfeit the championship out of pride. Ito's never heard of anything like this, but it's explained that Jashigan underwent a novel brain augmentation to give him superhuman battle instincts. This seems to be the terrible side effect. Upon looking at the readouts, Ito is shocked to realize that this is Zalem technology. Jashigan's brain has been completely remodeled using nanomachines. It's astonishing that someone in the scrapyard could perform this type of operation. Ito quickly puts the pieces together. If you remember from the past arc, it was revealed that Ito is from Zalem, and the mark on his forehead is the sign of Zalem citizenship. If Shumira recognized the mark and assumed he was a doctor, then it must be that there is another Zalemite doctor in the scrapyard. You also might remember back in the first arc, Makaku also revealed that the doctor who saved his life and created his worm cyborg body also had the same mark as Ito. So it seems, whoever they are, they're going around performing bizarre medical procedures on people for their own obscure reasons. All of that doesn't really matter right now, though. Ito's plan to save Jashigan is to attach electrodes to his brain and pass Shumira's brainwaves through an amp to stimulate it, because the best jolt to a person's system is the voice of a loved one. He tells Shumira to pray with all her heart for Jashigan's recovery. The power of love will triumph. This does not seem medically sound at all, but it does work. Back on the track, Jashigan suddenly appears behind his challengers, announcing that there is only one champion here, and he is not going to relinquish the crown anytime soon. Two of the three are obliterated almost immediately by Jashigan's attacks. The last turns to attack with what looks like a giant bottle opener. The champion's attack seems to corkscrew around his weapon and obliterate him. That's Maschinenkratz, Mon 89B Sidewinder. Thus Jashigan's undefeated record holds strong. You know, I wonder if the reason Second League is more popular than Top League is because people have gotten a little bored with watching Jashigan win all the time. This gives Ito a diabolical idea. He'll use Joshigan to crush Alita's pride and have her come crawling back to him. We've reached one of the things about this arc that bugs me, which is Ito's sudden regression into this manipulative, jealous, and spiteful person. It's an incredibly unpleasant side to what is otherwise a very benevolent character that seems to come up very inconsistently. He had a brief episode in the first arc, it defines him in this arc, and then I don't think it ever comes up again. Like his hunter-warrior bloodlust that came up exactly once, it's a character trait that I have a hard time fitting into who Ito is coherently. Anyway, that is the end of this little episode. Our story picks up sometime later when Alita is training. She attacks 3 training dummies, breaking the first 2. The third she strikes with an open palm. Then after she jumps away, its head explodes. Umba is very impressed at this little magic trick, which Alita explains is Panzerkunst, a cyborg specialized martial art. Again, I truly apologize for my attempts at German pronunciation. The first dummy was destroyed by a Hakenwende, the second by a Havertrabant, and the last by a Herzahauen. That last is a move that involves vibrating her fist at 100 Hz and targeting all its destructive power at the brain of the target, effective against targets with armored skulls. Alita, of course, has no memory of how she learned to do these things. Her memory really only goes back a few months at this point, but when she's on the track and in the midst of the fight, everything rushes back to her just an instant before she forgets again. Then Alita starts getting introspective, noting that just about everything about her is interchangeable. Her cyborg body can be swapped out, and even her name is only a placeholder. So what is the real her, the one hiding behind these eyes? Fragile, arrogant, cowardly, cruel. Who is she? Her only clue is her Panzerkunst, the only thing from her old life she can remember, and the only way she's found to recall more of her moves is to keep fighting. So now we have a further motive for Alita's decision to throw herself into Motorball. Umba is confident Alita's Panzerkunst can go up against the champion's Maschinenkrats, though Alita seems less confident. Ed comes in then, and he's bearing bad news. He takes them to the Second League Gymnasium basement, where he introduces them to their sponsor, Mr. Thompson of Trench Bloom's Scrap Pioneering. The sponsorship contract has gone without a hitch. That isn't the problem. The problem should be trivial, but Ed expects Alita to throw a tantrum. You see, each player in a league gets a number between 0 and 99. There are no more than 100 players in both the third and second league, so new players take on the numbers of retiring players. Alita chose 99 when she entered the third league, which was fine since nobody was using it, but that number is already in use by a player in the second league. The easy solution would be for Alita to choose another number for her debut in the second league, but as Ed predicted, Alita has decided to be stubborn. She must wear 99, and doesn't even give a reason why, she just likes it. Once she sets her mind on something, she never changes it. So they tried negotiating with the player currently using the number, but he threw a fit too, so now there's only one way Alita will be able to use 99. A one-on-one game with the number on the line. His name is Idacati, number 99 and 23rd in the point rankings of the second league. He's just as prideful as Alita and talks all sorts of trash to her. This uppity third league girl thinks she can waltz into the second league and take his number? Ed is terrified Alita is going to snap, but Umba eggs her on to teach this guy a lesson. Alita herself just wants to confirm the terms. If she beats this old man, she gets to use the number 99 in the second league. She's all in. Officially, this will be going into the books as a practice match, so no weapons, and they'll be using this metal skull instead of a ball. Whoever can place the skull on the hook at the second turn wins the match, played to the best out of 3. Each match will be over in 20 seconds. The racers take their place at the start. Umba, ever Alita's cheerleader, is confident that she'll take this easily, but Ed knows a few things about Idacati. The only reason he isn't higher in the rankings is that he's focused more on fighting than on winning points, so Alita might be in for a bigger challenge than she realizes. The match begins with Alita scooping the skull, taking advantage of her lighter weight and agility. Idacati closes the gap in the first turn, launching attacks that Alita easily deflects and knocks her opponent onto his back. However, it's a feint. Idacati attacks with his feet, entrapping and snapping one of her legs off. Alita careens off the course, crashing into a wall of tires as Idacati snatches up the skull and wins the first match, bragging about his, Asian arts. A smile creeps across Alita's face. This sort of challenge is what she's been looking for. As they prepare for round 2, Umba advises her to be careful because they only have the one spare leg. Meanwhile, their sponsor, Mr. Thompson, thinks they may have picked the wrong opponent and advises that they cut their losses and forfeit. Despite his ranking, Idacati has destroyed over 145 opponents on the track. Among Motorball fans, he's known as the Crusher and the King Without a Crown. He might just be too much for Alita at this point, and this really is a very pointless fight. Ed acknowledges the concern, but knows there's no stopping Alita once she's started. He has faith in her and insists that Thompson must have faith too. Alita isn't blind to this. When she sees Ed, Alita correctly surmises that the sponsor will likely pull out if she wrecks this wetzoig again. She appreciates Ed's faith in her, remarking that he's nicer than he looks, and gives him a peck on the cheek in thanks. Now she's got a game to win. It's time for round 2. Idacati promises to crush her into scrap this time, so there won't be a round 3. Alita is silent. This time, Idacati pulls ahead at the start, snatching up the skull. It seems the leg replacement might be slowing Alita down. They didn't have time to precisely tune it. Taking front position, Idacati starts kicking behind him to attack Alita with his feet. Alita is able to block the strikes. He responds by twisting and attacking with the other leg from the side. This time, Alita catches the blow and uses its momentum to launch herself up and over Idacati, elbowing him in the back such that he loses contact with the ground. As she makes contact with the ground, Alita pulls her opponent along with her by the leg and throws him. Idacati is the one tumbling into the tires this time. That was an incredibly impressive move, but Ed points out that this isn't over yet. Idacati still has the skull. Incensed, he rips off his face covering and charges at Alita. He rolls into a low shin kick, aiming to destroy her leg again and then smash her face in with his fist once she falls. Alita sees the attack coming and flips up and over. She lands precisely on Idacati's arms, flashing a palm strike at his face. If you remember what she's capable of from the training session earlier, Alita has him dead to rights. But she notes that this is just a practice match, snatches the skull from his hands, and scores. Idacati concedes defeat, acknowledging that Alita is more worthy of the number 99 than he. Technically, there should be another round, best 2 out of 3, but after that exchange, Idacati realizes that he can't beat her again. He only asks Alita where she learned such moves, as they do not seem like Earthian arts to him. She says they are Mars Krieg, the battle style of Mars, Panzerkunst. After that episode concludes, we skip some days or perhaps a week later. Our story picks up in a bustling market in the scrapyard. Alita is taking a break from the track with Ed, browsing the stalls. It's a week until her first race in the second league, so Ed thought this would be a good opportunity to enjoy the day. Apparently, Umba has agoraphobia and hates crowds, so he didn't come. Unfortunately, this pleasant day is interrupted by a biker gang, roaring between the stalls and smashing indiscriminately. Well, they don't really interrupt Alita, she just keeps talking to Ed like they aren't even there. Alita has something to get off her chest and isn't going to let minor thugs like this interrupt her. The first gets a fist in the face as he passes by. Alita seems to be having some misgivings, not about joining Motorball per se, but about cutting someone out of her life when she made that choice. She's talking about Ito, of course. Ed teases her, asking if it was a romantic relationship, but she flatly denies anything like that. He just did a lot for her and took care of her when she was in a very vulnerable place, giving her a body and a name. She loves him very much for that. She wouldn't be here without him. But Alita knows she didn't explain herself well to him, or at all, really. While Alita is explaining all this to Ed, another biker is attacking her. When he tries to drive his front tire into her head, she just picks up the whole bike and tosses it into some sort of drainage canal, rider and all. Ed recognizes she's feeling guilty and warns that kind of guilt can be a slow-acting poison, but he also says small amounts of poison can ease suffering, so better some than none at all. To be honest, I don't really follow what he's saying here, and Alita doesn't seem to either, though she accepts it. Ed quickly switches topics to ask what that move was. Alita calls it the biker spike. Eventually, Ed leads them to a ramen stand where they eat. Suddenly, Kimji takes off from Alita and alights on Shumira's finger, who announces that he belongs to her. Then, Joshigon appears by her side, chiding her not to steal. Ed and Joshigon greet each other like old friends. Apparently, he used to go by S-Dog, which is also the name of his motorball team, S-Dog Motors, so that makes sense. We also learn that his medical condition is called terminal frost spasms. At any rate, Ed introduces Alita as the newest member of his team. Joshigon, in turn, introduces his new tuner, Dr. Ito. Alita is shocked, but the doctor pretends not to know her. Alita can't fathom what exactly Ito is after here or why he's behaving like this, though she ultimately plays along and pretends not to know him. While she is processing, Shumira gives Kimji back and latches onto Ito's arm possessively. They all sit down together, Joshigon and Ed reminiscing about their old rivalry, back when Ed was a racer. The champion is a bit sad it's all in the past now, but Ed insists that Alita will get to the top league in no time to challenge him. Joshigon is looking forward to it, but then Ito opens his big mouth. He mocks the idea of a little girl challenging the champion, laughing at it. He calls it the height of folly and suggests she would have more luck turning tricks on the corner. Jeez, Ito. Ed is angry, and Joshigon quickly tries to move on from this topic before a fight breaks out. But Alita stands up. She challenges Joshigon to a fight right here and now. His Maschinenkrats against her Panzerkunst. He commends her determination, but says that he only fights for money, telling her to keep working and come at him the proper way, through Motorball. The tense situation is interrupted by the entrance of an entire motorcycle gang, seemingly the group that those two bikers from earlier belonged to. That turns out to be true, as the biggest and angriest biker stomps right up to Alita and demands to know if she's the bitch that showed up their boys earlier. Being pretty angry already, Alita tells him that if he touches her, he'll lose his head. Joshigon intercedes, looking to de-escalate the situation. He puts a 1 million credit chip on the table and offers a gentleman's game, arm wrestling. If the biker wins, he can have the chip and Alita. but if Joshigan wins, he'll pack up and leave. The biker accepts with the enthusiastic approval of his crew. Alita is concerned. Unlike her, Joshigan isn't in his Motorball body right now. The biker should be stronger and more powerful than Joshigan in his civilian body. Joshigan and the biker get ready, with Ed tapping their hands to signal the start. Then Joshigan slams the biker's hand to the table instantaneously. In the blink of an eye, it's over. The biker falls to the ground stunned, and his crew sputter in confusion. The result is clear. They can even see their boss's knuckles imprinted in the table. Joshigan takes off his shades, allowing the bikers to finally recognize him as the champion, and tells these low-lives to get lost, which they promptly do. Alita herself is pretty surprised by what Joshigan just pulled off, so he explains. He did not need Panzerkunst or Machinekratz or special body modifications to do that. That was what Joshigan calls ki. And to be clear, we're not talking about spiritual energy or anything like that. As the champion explains it, nothing about fighting techniques is hard. All you do is strike when you need to and evade when you need to. What's important is the speed and power of your mind, and the concentration power to execute that movement is your ki. Effectively, ki is one's mental ability to focus and direct one's movements in the most efficient and effective way possible to counter an opponent. He's willing to help Alita understand this if she'll play a game. If Joshigan loses an arm wrestling match with her, he'll accept her challenge for a Motorball match. But if she loses, she'll have to give up. Alita responds by ripping her shirt open, much to everyone's shock. She opens up her chest and lifts out her own heart, offering it up for the wager. She proffers it to Ed, who is more than a little freaked out by seeing this level of intensity from Alita. She demands that if she loses, that she wants Ed to crush the heart and throw it away. Ed reluctantly agrees to do as she asks. Curiously, Alita's anger seems to be directed at Ito. It seems like she's figured out that he wants Joshigan to break her pride, and is making a point that that isn't going to happen, even if it costs her life. For his part, this has all gone much further than Ito expected or wanted. Alita and Joshigan grasp hands for their match, sweat dripping down Alita's face as she focuses. Now that I think about it, I guess I never wondered whether Alita's cyborg body can sweat, but I guess at least her face can. Joshigan, for his part, seems unperturbed, but he admits that he's impressed by her spirit in risking her heart for what he regards as just a little after-meal entertainment. Alita is fascinating to him. Ed prepares to signal the start of the match, but he seems more nervous than either of them, as he starts to shake. As Alita herself starts shaking with the intensity of her grip, Joshigan tells her not to tense up so much before the start. After all, he's only in his daily use body right now. Just by reading the fine vibrations coming through Alita's arm, Joshigan gets a sense of the structure. It's a well-crafted wetzoig, he must admit. He can tell by the wear of her joints that Alita has great confidence in her speed, and that the design sacrifices strength for flexibility. Still, she should be at least 4 or 5 times stronger than his current body. None of that gives Joshigan pause. He's confident he can win in a moment with one decisive burst of ki. Ed, meanwhile, is having a bit of an internal crisis. He clarifies and reiterates what using ki actually means. Ki is the ability to read the opponent's action in an instant ahead of time to focus all of one's mental and physical power into the exact power of maximum efficacy. He likens it to using a magnifying glass to focus the rays of the sun and burn through a piece of paper. So even if Joshigan is in a weaker body, he's still able to win because he uses his strength in the most efficient and effective way possible, at just the right time. He's also, of course, freaking out at the prospect of having to crush Alita's heart. Ed tells himself that he has to believe in her. And besides, he knows from experience that one's concentration can rise to otherwise impossible levels when life is on the line. Desperation might just give her the edge she needs to match Jashigan's ki. Ed goes to start the match, and then he suffers another spasm as his medical condition acts up again. He hands off the judging duties to Ito instead, who is feeling very conflicted. He joined Jashigan's team because he wanted Alita to lose, yes, but he doesn't want her to die, and he doesn't think she can win. He declines, saying he's opposed to games with such obvious outcomes, making Alita look at him like she wants to rip his heart out. Ed is incredulous, pointing out this all started because he ran his mouth. Ito tries to get Jashigan to give up the challenge by arguing that killing this girl is nothing to brag about. Acknowledging that may be true, the champion nonetheless says that he cannot back down, having seen the strength of Alita's will. He calls in his sister to act as judge, to which she agrees, though not without trying to make her own addition to the bargain. If Alita dies, Shimura wants Kimchi. Finally, all is set. Shimura taps their fists with a spoon to start the contest. Alita uses every ounce of her speed and seems to win for a moment, much to everyone's shock, but not quite. Jashigan brings their fists to a dead stop just barely above the table. He compliments her before forcing them back to equilibrium. Ed is shocked by Jashigan's power against Alita's motorball body, but Ito notices that something is burning. Alita's arm appears to be burning holes in her jacket. Suddenly, it explodes. This is not just a poorly timed mechanical failure. Jashigan was deliberately focusing his ki on straining and destroying the weakest parts of her arm's internal structure. A good 80% of the actuators in Alita's arm are now useless. He abruptly lets go of her hand, saying it would be a waste for her to die here. Now the champion wants to face her on the race circuit, to settle this once and for all. He accepts her challenge. But the rules state that he can't have a one-on-one match with a second league player, so she'll have to put together a team of at least 5 players to challenge him. Once she has her team, he will gladly accept her challenge. In fact, he's looking forward to it. Jashigan departs with Ito and Shimura, leaving Ed and Alita. Ed gives Alita her heart back and lightly chides her for taking 10 years off his life with that stunt. She looks happy, though. Alita is glad to learn that there are people as incredible as Jashigan out there in the world. Meanwhile, we see that the arm Jashigan had used to arm wrestle Alita abruptly falls off. Ito and Shimura are shocked, but the champion reveals that Alita was sending some sort of vibration into his arm. Remember Herzahauen from earlier? Something like that. He may have destroyed 80% of the actuators in her arm, but she destroyed virtually 100% of his. He would have lost had the match gone on any longer. He calls this just another reason to hold out and survive. He's clearly just as excited as Alita to face her on the track. We move forward to Alita's debut race in the second league. This is a special race, not just because of her entering the second league, but because word has gotten around about her match with Jashigan. Effectively, this has become a tryout for the other players who might want to join her team to face the champion. As Alita makes her entrance to the stadium, Ed remarks that the look on her face has changed since her meeting with Jashigan. Before, she looked desperate and ready to lash out. Alita says that it's because she has a goal now. She's learned something, though it may sound obvious. Every human being needs something to stand up and fight against. If you run away or protect your own hide, you're bound to go soft and rot away. You've got to keep fighting, or else you'll ruin yourself. At the very least, that's the kind of person she is. Suddenly, Idacati shows up, addressing Alita casually as Sis, and now wearing the number 88. Apparently, he's already made a spot in her team for facing Jashigan. He has some ideas for filling out the rest of the team, but before they can even get into the stadium, they find the way blocked by this giant rolling tortoise of a racer apparently taking a nap in the middle of the hallway. Idakati tries to get him out of the way, but instead the player grabs him and starts blubbering. He says he's in love with Alita and begs to be allowed on the team. Old Teagle here is Alita's biggest simp, both in size and in spirit. He's a bit confused when he realizes that the Alita he picked up has a beard, which gives Idakati the opportunity to drop-kick Teagle far away. As he explains to Alita, Teagle is known as the shame of the Second League, being perpetually in the basement of the point rankings. He doesn't want her to worry herself about that, though. He has 3 racers he wants to introduce as candidates. These are his students, trained by him in various secret Asian arts, who will lead the Second League in the future. We have number 9, Halbert the Kicker, trained in the art of Taekwondo. Number 24, Scramasax the Runner, trained in Idakati's own preferred style of Yun-Yang Ditanchen. And number 33, Basilard the Pile Driver, trained in Muay Karchuk. Those are Korean, Chinese, and Thai martial arts respectively. I suspect I did not pronounce any of them correctly, but I did try. Basilard has an objection. He's happy to have the opportunity to go against the champion, but he can't fathom his master taking orders from a mere girl. Idakati is aghast, refusing to tolerate such insolence to Sister Alita, but she is unperturbed. She says it takes patience to correct misconceptions with words, but she's the hot-headed type. One blow should be enough to make him understand. Basilard takes her challenge for what it is and attacks. He uses his namesake pile driver, stopping only when it's about to hit Alita's face. But Alita's blade is poised to eviscerate his life support system. Basilard is impressed, and Alita calls it a draw, complimenting Idakati on the skill of his students. But he recognizes that Alita could have destroyed Basilard's life support system before his attack hit her. It wasn't really a draw. Suddenly, he hears a sound like sharpening blades. 2 racers are watching the exchange, one low and squat, the other tall and covered in tracked blades. He's sharpening his claws, asking what they're doing, having a strategy meeting when the race is about to start. Idakati explains that this is Armbrust, known as the Caligula, the cruelest and most brutal Second League champion in history. The smaller one is his sycophantic henchman, Dirty Peshcabs. Armbrust addresses Alita directly, telling her she'll never get a match with Joshigon because he's going to splatter her brains on the track now. Alita is completely nonchalant and unimpressed. She'd forgotten that the Second League even had a champion, saying that if he wants on her team, he should have just said so instead of bragging. She'll think about it. Armbrust proceeds to stomp on his henchman in impotent rage. Idakati praises Alita's talent for taunting, though she says she only said what came to mind. As they move into the pits and listen to Umba complain that they need to do final checks, a blur speeds by Alita so fast she can barely react to it. If this had been a real fight, Alita would be dead right now. That's number 7, the Crimson Wind, Zafal Taki, known not as a fighter, but for a player that relies entirely on her superb racing prowess. She also seems to be the only other female player Alita has met, which interests her. Elsewhere, Joshigon is watching the race on TV, interested to see what Alita can do. He asks Ito if he's going to watch the race, but he refuses, prompting Joshigon to ask why he's hiding his connection to Alita. What game is he playing? The champion doesn't miss a trick. Continuing in the next volume, we see that Alita has been given starting position number 13. It seems they use a computer to draw lots in determining that, with those with the highest point ranking being given placement priority. The track is Gregory Circuit, a deadly racetrack where the slightest mistake can lead to a fatal crash, partly because the whole thing seems to be suspended over a field of spikes. The grid order shows us that Alita, Idacati, Teagle, and Taki are starting toward the rear of the pack. Armbrust and Idacati's students are starting toward the front. As Alita warms up, Ed reminds her that the purpose of this match is to identify the team she wants to take against Jashigan, so she shouldn't go overboard. Alita assures him that it makes no difference. She always fights at maximum strength. So back to the conversations between Jashigan and Ito. The champion affirms that Ito saved his life, but they'll be hell to pay if Ito took advantage of Shumira to get to him and help Alita win. Ito is quick to deny anything of the sort and decides to come clean. He admits to Jashigan that he's right, he does know Alita. This conversation is intercut with the race, so we'll be switching back and forth for a bit here. Bear with me. The race begins with Idacati's student Scramasax emerging from the scrum with the ball. Teagle is doing his best to impress Alita, though unfortunately he's so big that Idacati's trapped behind him. Alita has also gotten stuck in the middle of the pack, though Taki is speeding ahead. Back at Jashigan's apartment, Ito clarifies that Alita is like a daughter to him. He came here to get his runaway girl back, but he knows how stubborn and focused she is. The only way to get her to come around was for her to be completely crushed in a game, so he came to the champion. Returning to the track, Dirty Peshkabs is making a move on Alita, seeking to kill her per Armbrust's orders. Alita laughs in his face, but suddenly she finds herself up against 3 second leaguers at once, all acting on his command. Peshkabs breaks a spike off his frame and tosses it at Alita's legs, hoping to trip her up. Alita goes down, but is caught by Idacati. Using handheld or thrown weapons is supposed to be against the rules, but the referees are considering it a wet zoic damage accident rather than a violation. Alita goes high while Idacati goes low, taking down 2 of her attackers, with Alita destroying her opponent in midair. Peshkabs responds by releasing an oil slick, but she's able to get around it with some help. She has Idacati carry her over the slick. His entire fighting style is about controlled tumbling, so he's not worried about slipping on the slick. Peshkabs next smashes a nearby racer with his own weapon, creating a fiery explosion that ignites the oil slick, but then Alita flies through the flames. She calls Peshkabs an idiot and snags his stolen weapon, but he quickly retreats by jumping into the stands, crashing into a crowd of people at hundreds of kilometers an hour. This is the scrapyard, so this isn't going to stop the match, but even by their standards, this is a pretty grisly, dirty move. Alita is enraged by this, reversing mid-course and committing a foul to go after Peshkabs. She gets her hands on him just as he's edging back onto the track to punish him for his transgression. Alita throws him down and delivers a Herzahauen to the dome that seemingly causes his brain to explode. She took a penalty, but won over the crowd. So back in the apartment, Ito is still trying to convince Jashigan that he has no ill intent. Meeting Shumira and getting close to Jashigan was ultimately a complete coincidence, not a part of some plan to manipulate him. The champion accepts this, saying he's glad Ito isn't a bad person, as he would hate to make his sister cry. He also appreciates the importance of family. But then Jashigan keels over, collapsing onto a table. The next page shows us Shumira full frontal in the shower. Yeah, I'll say this feels pretty weird for a character that's been presented in a very naive and childlike light to be suddenly shown nude. I'm happy to say this is pretty much an anomaly in the series, but it is weird. In any case, she's reflecting on how happy she is that Ito and now her brother are in the apartment these days, as previously she was left alone here a lot of the time. She does not think fondly of Alita because Ito likes her, and scares herself with the idea that her brother might leave if Ito does. Then she gets distracted by soap in her eye. Meanwhile, Ito is checking Jashigan. His brain activity is flatlined again. Determined to save his patient, Ito rises to get his equipment and Shumira, but Jashigan stops him. He suddenly revived all on his own. Back on the track, Alita apologizes to Ed for committing a foul. She's loitered for so long that Teagle catches up to her, begging to be let on her team. Alita takes one look at him and zooms right out of there. Up front, Scramasack still has the ball as he heads into the vertical loop, but Taki has passed the entire rest of the field to take second place. Armbrust isn't far behind. Fans of his start sticking their fists through the fence to take part in a gruesome ritual. The Caligula slices off the hands of one fan and sticks them onto his spiked horns. These hands of glory are a sort of horrific victory charm for him. He does it a lot apparently, and his fans go nuts for it. Behind him, Idacati's other students, Basilard and Halberd, are making mincemeat of the rest of the field. They make their own move on Armbrust, but the second league champion is ready to show how he earned that title. He darts between their attacks and takes Halberd in a headlock. Those tracked blades on his body start spinning. Armbrust is basically covered in chainsaws. He starts cutting into Halberd until the whole top of his head is cut out. Basilard attempts to avenge him, but Armbrust cuts right through him, killing him instantly. Idacati looks on in horror as Halberd tumbles, his brain falling out of his half-skull and splattering at high speed on the track. The grieving teacher leaps to avenge his students and duel Armbrust. He executes his signature move, tumbling in front of Armbrust and attacking with his feet, successfully destroying one of Armbrust's legs. However, Armbrust reveals he sacrificed his leg to draw Idacati into a trap, as he unveils his ultimate weapon. His body folds up and a spike emerges from his back. Armbrust starts spinning as a bladed top, his ultimate technique, Gushiken. Idacati stands no chance. His body is torn apart. Thankfully, his head and brain are intact when Alita stops to check on him. She tells him to get himself fixed up as she sets her sights on Armbrust. Back with Ito and Jashigan, the champion asks Ito to promise that should he flatline and not come back, the doctor should take care of Shumira. Ito tells him not to be so pessimistic. He's the immortal champion, after all. But Jashigan has no illusions about his prospects. The damage from the augmentation he underwent to enhance his use of ki is coming back to bite him. His brain is about to tear itself apart and his death is near. Ito apologizes and admits that the scrapyard doesn't have the technology, nor does he have the skill to save Jashigan's life. The champion is at peace with that, but he wants to stay alive for one final match, to compete against Alita. So, back on the track, Armbrust has extended his blades in chain-like whips to dice anyone that approaches him. Alita closes in, demanding to know if he really enjoys killing that much. Armbrust affirms, "I live, I kill, I wield the powers of destruction with mad abandon. Compared to that, the powers of the Creator are but child's play." So, he's a sadist with a god complex. Terrific. Alita can't get any closer because of his spinning blades, but sees an opportunity as they approach the vertical loop in the track. As they head up, Alita jumps to the other side of the loop, timing it so that she comes down directly on Armbrust from above, counting the steps of her attack in German. The second league champion anticipates her move, however, and undoes his transformation to block her strike. Rebuffed, Alita finds Armbrust's chain blades closing in on her in mid-air. Armbrust is confident that his diamond-tipped chain blades will cut right through Alita's Damascus blades, but instead they get stuck halfway through. She uses the chain blades as leverage to land a strong kick on Armbrust. The recoil of the kick allows Alita to land safely on the track, but Armbrust isn't so lucky. He falls past the track onto the field of spikes below, just barely avoiding impalement. He still has enough attitude to promise that he would have torn Alita apart if she hadn't pushed him out of the race, She just tells him to go ahead and talk, seeing where that got him. Up ahead, Scramasac still has possession of the ball, determined to bring home the gold after what happened to his fellow disciples Halberd and Basilard. Taki is right on his tail. He takes a swipe at her, but she dodges easily and grabs hold of the ball. The ball connecting them, Taki leaps into the air on the outside of the track in a turn. Scramasax is sent into an uncontrolled spin as he hits his brakes for fear of them both going over. He loses control of their combined, unbalanced momentum. Taki evidently guides their spin until Scramasax's arm strikes an obstacle and shatters. He careens off the track and Taki takes possession of the ball. As Alita speeds to catch up, the announcer reminds us that we're still only half a lap into this race and 14 of the 18 racers have crashed or otherwise been destroyed. An extraordinarily unpredictable match. Only Taki, Alita, Teagle, and another racer we'd never see again are left. Taki comes to a surprise stop right before a tubular section of the track. She's waiting for Alita and throws the ball to her. Then she points at Alita and gives her a thumbs down, silently stating her intent to take Alita down. This is a personal challenge. It seems Taki will only consider her victory complete if she takes the ball from Alita's hands. They both burst into motion, plunging into the tunnel. Ed chimes into Alita's earpiece, warning her that her opponent is an expert reaction fighter. She's a master of provoking her opponents into attacks and taking advantage of the openings they create. Ignoring Taki and trying to outrun her somewhat goes against Alita's instincts as a fighter, but she takes his advice, tearing through the tunnel. Alita thinks she has a lead until Taki taps her on the shoulder. Spooked, Alita takes a swipe at Taki, which the racer easily dodges by going nearly parallel to the ground and grabbing Alita's feet, pulling them out from under her. Alita goes down and Taki takes the ball. Moving into the second half of this 2-chapter race, let's check up on Teagle. He's still struggling with the loop. He's too big and not nearly fast enough to make it. Upon seeing Alita take such a severe spill, Teagle is determined to help her, so he takes out his secret weapon, Tabasco Charger Hot Sauce. After guzzling it, he's incensed to new speeds and pushes all the way through the loop. Almost, he actually falls off the back half of it. As for Alita, she pulls herself into the pit for repair. Her joints are damaged, so Umba's going to have to replace them and align them in record time if she's going to have any chance of intercepting Taki on her second lap. Remember, it's only the number of laps the ball makes that matters in Motorball, not the players, so Alita can win as long as she takes the ball from Taki before she finishes the final lap. To accomplish the quick repairs, Umba links himself to this tentacle machine and goes to work repairing her body. I swear there isn't actually anything dirty about this. Ed is concerned about Alita's mental state after getting so flatly beaten in racing. If she loses confidence, it's over. When asked if she can keep going, Alita responds very strangely, talking about a red mountain. A terrifyingly huge red mountain. She thinks it was where she learned how to fight. Ed is stunned that she seems to have gotten some of her memories back. When she fell in fear of Taki, the bitter taste of defeat brought the image of that mountain to Alita's mind. That's all she can remember for now, but it felt like home to her. Taki takes her final lap as Alita rejoins the race like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Taki is slowed down slightly by the weight of the motorball, allowing Alita to keep pace. They head into the loop, and Alita remarks that this is the first time she's actually found Motorball to be fun, letting her test the limits of her own power. She pulls a similar move as she did against Armbrust, launching herself into the loop to land in front of Taki. Alita snaps a kick at the oncoming racer, which Taki attempts to jump over and thus falls right into Alita's trap. It was a feint. Alita pivots with her outstretched leg and flips to snag Taki right out of the air and drive her helplessly into the ground. Taki is beaten, but the ball flies free and off the track. A new ball is placed on the track just before the finish line, and here comes Teagle, finishing his first lap. He's a bit confused, but happy for his good fortune, and takes the ball, much to the anger and disappointment of the announcer and fans alike. It's the final lap for the ball, so Teagle wins the whole match. He starts bawling because this is the first time he's ever won, and the crowd start rioting in anger at this result. Nobody wanted Teagle to win. Alita doesn't seem to mind, though, lost in thoughts of the Red Mountain. She remembers constantly asking it, "How much stronger can I really get?" Okay, taking a short diversion from the story here, you might be wondering how these Motorball players survive sustaining so much damage, or just how cyborgs in this world work. Well, the author was apparently being asked about that, so he included some helpful infographics at the back of the volume. These cyborgs, at least those like Alita and the Motorball players, have replaced everything but their brains. Effectively, they are a brain placed inside a very compact and compartmentalized life support system. Because of this, cyborgs can have most of their body destroyed and still remain functional as long as that compact life support system and their brain survive. The brain, in turn, is connected to the face system, composed of usually artificial bioparts, polymer parts, and mechanical parts. The face system provides sensory information to the brain. The brain is also connected to the artificial spinal column, which allows control of the body. According to this graphic, they also have an onboard cold fusion-powered generator, which explains why nobody is ever concerned about running out of power, I guess. It's mentioned that cyborg technology in the scrapyard hasn't advanced much in several centuries. Instead, they've simplified the structure to its limit and developed a modular system that makes repair and upgrading a piece of cake. Okay, back to the story. Sometime after the last race, Ed announces the other 4 members of Alita's challenge team for Joshigan. Idakati and Taki are there, no surprise, but also Armbrust and Teagle. Teagle is actually getting his wish. Well, I can give him points for perseverance at least, though somebody's going to have to stop Idakati from murdering Armbrust, presumably. Ito, Joshigan, and Shumira receive the news by broadcast, but Ito's really just concerned about preventing the champion from dying. He's rigged up a transmitter so he'll be able to send Shumira's brainwaves to Joshigan remotely, which should hopefully help revive him. Ito takes the opportunity to ask about the circumstances of the champion's brain augmentation and who performed it. It happened after a terrible accident. Joshigan had just made it to the top league when he was nearly killed in this disaster. His brain was damaged and he probably would have wasted away and died. Then this strange doctor calling himself Desti Nova appeared, performed a miraculous operation that restored his brain over 2 weeks, then left without accepting payment. Joshigan was unconscious for all this, but he was told the doctor had a mark on his forehead, the same as Ito has, so he was most likely from Zalem. Given the circumstances, Joshigan can't regret the surgery that led to these flatline episodes. He would have died otherwise. Elsewhere in the scrapyard, Ed is out on an errand. After Alita's Damascus blades were damaged fighting Armbrust, he's having them reforged as a single blade. To be honest, I completely lost track that she was supposed to have 2 of them until now. It seemed like the artist would often draw her with only one or neither being very visible. At any rate, the smith added some new materials to make the new blade exceptionally tough. Ed gets reflective and we learn a bit about his history. Ed and Joshigan were major rivals back in the day, reaching the top league at the same time, and he could even go toe-to-toe with Joshigan's machine crafts with his blade techniques. Ed was caught up in the same accident that nearly killed Joshigan, though he never really recovered from being maimed. He shot expensive nerve accelerants into his brain to try and keep up with Joshigan, but it was never enough. He became the undefeated champion, and Ed nothing more than another ex-Motorball junkie, developing his sickness as a result of taking those accelerants. That's why Ed is so invested in Alita winning. For him, it's a way of reclaiming his dreams of glory. He wants her to do what he couldn't, take over the world of Motorball. The Smith, by the way, lets him have the blade for free, though he asks Ed to give him the wet Zoig if Alita kicks the bucket. Ed isn't the only one doing some reflection tonight. Alita walks the vast piles of detritus sprawling out from below Zalem in the scrapyard, passing by what appears to be a cult worshipping the floating city. Someone calls her name, Ido. Alita questions why he called her out here and why she should even hear him out. He remarks on how great the view of Zalem is from here. He's been doing a bit of research. It turns out most of the Motorball facilities were built and funded through the factory. In short, the whole sport is a government tool to burn off the frustrations of the citizens of the scrapyard as the population grows. People also desire objects of worship, pointing out the Zalem cultists nearby. Ido asks Alita if she thought playing Motorball would allow her to become an idol or a hero. She denies it. Alita explains that when she lost Yugo, she felt such terrible pain and loneliness that she thought she would surely die. Her regrets kept her alive. She couldn't stand the thought of dying a loser, a nobody that lost everything to Zalem. Pity and sympathy were even worse than death to her, so she found her salvation in Motorball. So she doesn't regret getting involved in the sport. She's met many people, fought hard, and even grown a little bit. Ido says that sounds like something she would say. He reminds her of something she told him ages ago. No matter how much I might seem to change, I'll always be the same Alita you know. He trusts those words, no matter how much she might change or where she goes. Accepting her choices, Ido tells Alita that she's family to him, and family is irreplaceable. If she ever gets tired of Motorball, she can always come home. Alita is clearly touched by his words. This is the side of our cyborg doctor that I like to see. In yet another corner of the junk piles, Jashigan visits a cyborg living among car wrecks, addressing him as Master. It's clear that this is his teacher in machine crats. They face each other, rotors spinning in their fingers. With the barest touch, a transfer of energy causes an explosion to rip out of the old cyborg's back, frightening a nearby stray cat. The old master is impressed by Jashigan's power to exploit ki, but senses that he still has doubts. Picking up the stray cat to comfort it, Jashigan admits that he's afraid of death. The master can't believe what he's hearing. The essence of machine crats is synchronization with moving parts, and a machine does not fear death. Jashigan exclaims that he doesn't want to be a machine. He wants to be greater than a machine. The master just says that even humans are just incomplete machines. He surmises that Jashigan's sister is the source of his doubts, so he should just kill her, for a machine does not need love. Jashigan does not answer. Sometime later, this is all seemingly the same night, Alita is breaking the news to Ed that she plans to quit Motorball after her match with Jashigan, which she points out is the last of the set number of matches she contracted to play when she signed with them. He does not take this well. Ed grabs Alita by the shoulders and starts screaming in her face that she's going to beat Jashigan and become the next Motorball superstar, that she has the talent to win any kind of glory she can dream of. Alita is shocked. She's never seen this side of Ed before. She shakes him off and asserts that she doesn't care about glory. Ed responds by smacking her in the mouth. Just as Ido earns his way back into my likable character list, Ed has managed to speedrun his way off that list in a single page. He says he won't be held captive to her whims and starts dragging her down the street by the arm, saying they'll go to their sponsor and get her contract renewed. Alita is unresponsive. She's disappointed in Ed. She thought he understood her. Okay, the only thing I'll say in criticism of Alita here is that it is pretty inconsiderate of her to abruptly spring this on Ed. Ed and Umba have built all their plans for their future careers on Alita continuing to play Motorball. Springing on him that she's only going to play one more game is a nasty surprise. This doesn't excuse Ed's behavior here at all, that's not what I'm saying, but Alita could have put in a bit more thought about the consequences of her decisions for other people. As Ed drags her away, a crowd starts to form as Alita is recognized. She's a celebrity now, after all, with all that entails. That includes being approached by creepy fans on the street like this one that says he has a present for Alita. Ed instantly pegs him for a junkie. The guy pulls out what looks like a homemade gun made from a pipe. Ed instantly throws himself in front of Alita, taking the shot to the top of the head. She reacts violently, killing Ed's attacker in a single blow. Alita kneels by Ed, who's barely alive. Ed remarks that he must be the unluckiest son of a bitch. No arguments here. He gives Alita her blade, telling her not to lose. Ed's hand starts to shake, and he asks for his meds. Then it stops, for the last time. Alita holds the wrapped blade close and sheds a tear for Ed. The day of the challenge has finally arrived. The crowd gathers at Agrippa Circuit. Tickets are purchased, bets are made. The challenge has been advertised all around. So too have rumors of Alita's plan to quit, and Ed's tragic demise made the rounds. Even those bikers from earlier and those Zalem-worshipping cultists seem to be making their way to the stadium, filling the stands and monitor stations. Rumors of Joshigan's illness are also being bandied about, including crackpot theories that he's been replaced by an android from Zalem. Everyone seems aware that this will be the match of a lifetime, something the likes of which they might never see again. Whether in person or on TV, it seems like all the scrapyard is holding their breath to watch. Zalem, too, is paying attention, as the factory workers make sure everything is ready, and a great spotlight from the floating city falls on the track. A door rises, and Alita's team steps onto the track. The others bask in the exaltations of the roaring crowd, but Alita's thoughts turn to Ed, who I suppose I'll have to let back in my good book since he did take a bullet for her. Before the match, she reflected in the bathroom with Ed's hat on the sink, believing it was her selfishness that killed Ed. Personally, I wouldn't go that far, but I think Alita is recognizing what I said earlier, that quitting in that way was unfair and inconsiderate to Ed and Umba. She was only thinking about her own feelings, not the people depending on her. We see Umba bawling like a baby at Ed's death, not knowing what he's going to do, and Alita trying to comfort him. We also see Idacati confronting Alita, asking if it's true she's planning to quit. He's angry that she's treating Motorball like a stopgap, a way to pass the time. A true motorballer gives their life to the circuit. They'll do anything to draw the attention of the crowd. That's what makes his fallen students, even the hated Armbrust and the slowpoke Teagle, true motorballers. But not her. She's different. Not one of them. An outsider. In the bathroom, Alita slices through a drop of water falling from the ceiling, bisecting the mirror in the process. She agrees with Idacati. She doesn't give herself up to anything. She is an outsider that doesn't belong. Back in the present, Joshigan makes his entrance on the track. No handicaps today. Joshigan is deadly serious. Alita and her team will face him at the height of his power. The champion and Alita share a wordless look. The slightest of smiles tugs at the corner of his mouth. We see before the match that Joshigan is in bad shape, contemplating his imminent death. He feels no pain, but there's a sensation in the back of his throat like the taste of death. He can sense his brain cells crumbling. He knows the crowd wants to see him die like any other person. Someone once said that every hero needs to be killed, but he is a champion. Shumira interrupts his reflection. She wants to give her brother a good luck charm. Ito told her that Joshigan won't be competing anymore after this game, which actually makes Shumira happy. That means she'll be able to cook for her brother and be with him every day. Joshigan embraces her, and she's surprised to find that he's crying. He then suggests that she should marry Ito. I object to that, but I'm pretty sure Joshigan is mostly saying this because he wants Ito to take care of Shumira once he's gone. He also knocks her out with a tranquilizer, much to Ito's distress. She'll be out for 2 hours, which Ito points out means she won't be able to act as his lifeline if he has another episode during the match. Joshigan only says that until now he has only ever fought for his own sake. But now, for this final match, he wants to do it for her. He wants Shumira to be able to hold her head high and proudly say that she is the sister of the champion, and he wants her to live strong. He will not disgrace the circuit. He will return triumphant. That will be the legacy he leaves her with. At the start of the race, Joshigan takes his position at the rear of the pack. The ball is released, and the match begins. We enter the final chapter, Ars Magna. Joshigan speeds after Alita's team, wondering if Zalem is watching, and asserting to himself that he will spend what little time he has left fighting as the champion he is. He goes after Armbrust first. His shredding arm tears right through Armbrust's blades. The second league champion lets out his blade chains and tries to untangle Joshigan, as the latter strikes him in the back with his knee. To no avail. The Caligula is left as scrap on the track, body torn to pieces. He sets his eyes on Alita and Idacati, but Teagle comes up from behind and tries to ram Joshigan. He's able to just jump over Teagle, who gets lodged in the track wall. Idacati is next, attacking with his signature kicks. One block is enough for Joshigan to completely twist around his leg and lift him off the track. Idacati tries to attack with his fists, but his arm gets the same treatment. He is almost instantly torn apart, though he seems to still be alive. Alita is horrified and starts braking to face Joshigan. Up ahead, Taki is about to take possession of the ball. Joshigan takes one of Armbrust's chain blades, still wrapped around him, and whips it around to stop her. The blade chain cuts her in half at the waist just as she's about to touch the ball. You know, I've just realized that we spent 3 chapters showing off and recruiting this team of badasses, just so that Joshigan could instantly obliterate them to show off how badass he is. It's just the champion and Alita now. He blocks her first strike with Armbrust's blade chain. She cuts through it, but the moment she's in reach, he hits her with a palm strike to the face that sends her flying into the wall of the track. She tumbles and her helmet breaks. Joshigan takes possession of the ball, but stops to look at Alita. He asks if this is the limit of her power, and demands she show him her Panzerkunst. Enraged, Alita stands and finds herself in another place. A barren landscape stretches out before her. She understands this must be a hallucination or a dream, but she recognizes it. A ragged cyborg stands from a ridge behind her, saying that, despite her gender, she has conquered his training, addressing her by the name Yoko. She finds herself calling him Meister, and tries to correct him about her name, but he continues to speak. Before she leaves, he shall pass a Geheimnis to her. That's the German word for secret, or in this context, a secret of Panzerkunst. And then she's back on the track, panting. She wonders about that red wasteland, her Meister, Yoko. Who is she? She feels scared, like she's no longer the same person anymore. Nothing about her is solid. Nothing is certain. Alita realizes she needs some kind of proof to keep on living. Jashigan strikes, but Alita deflects the blow and slashes at his head. He leans away from the attack and drives her away with a knee strike to the abdomen. She's sent flying, and Jashigan falls to the ground. The champion's mask falls off, cleaved in two. He's ecstatic, recognizing that Alita matched his ki at just the right moment to counter his Sidewinder. As for Alita, she believes she can gain some proof of herself by fighting him, so she's going to fight like her life depends on it. Jashigan laughs, saying that they stand within the very world. At Alita's questioning look, he holds up the Motorball. This is all the glory of their world and the object they all fight over. But it is not what Alita or Jashigan are seeking, is it? Alita smiles, and there's something about Jashigan that reminds her of herself. He dismisses the Motorball as a trinket and tosses it away. Jashigan says he has a deal not to kill her with Dr. Ito, but she should remember well what's about to happen. They invoke the showdown rule. If you remember back when I explained the Motorball rules, if there are only 2 players left, all the normal rules of Motorball basically go out the window, and it becomes a one-on-one duel for victory. The Motorball no longer matters. Up in the stands, we find Ito and Shumira. The latter is still sleeping off the tranquilizer. Ito has 2 bottles of contraband Zalem wine, which he apparently snagged from Vector at some point. One is to celebrate Alita's safe return. The other is to celebrate Jashigan's triumph. He plans to have a big toast once everyone is back safe and sound. We also get a short look at the cleanup crews as they pick up the remains of Alita's team. Surprisingly, Armbrust is still alive, though he's apparently deeply traumatized. Teagle is also still kicking and reluctant to be taken off the field. Back in the fight, Jashigan launches another attack, but Alita avoids it with some acrobatics, deflecting with her knee and launching a kick at his midsection. Alita thinks she's figured out the key to victory. As she sees it, the weakness of Machine Kratz is the simplicity of its rhythm. As long as she catches that first blast of ki and stays out of its way, her Panzerkunst has the advantage in close combat. As the landscape of Mars appears around them in her mind, Alita recounts that one of the great Panzerkunst techniques is to mimic the enemy rhythm, throw it off, and melt away into feints and tricks. It's called the Einsatzrhythmen, or also guerrilla rhythm. This seems to be working. Things are not going well for Jashigan. His eyesight suddenly starts to blur as his brain's degradation advances. Desperate for more time, he lashes out, then activates his rollers to flip Alita over his arm and drive her forcibly into the ground. Up in the stands, the guy in front of Ito starts calling for Jashigan to slaughter Alita, prompting Ito to smash one of his expensive wine bottles over the guy's head. Jashigan has Alita pinned, but before he can deliver the final blow, Teagle comes out of nowhere to tackle him in desperation to save Alita. Bewildered, Jashigan asks who he is, to which Teagle announces that he is the immortal Teagle, as he smashes the champion into the side of the track. This completely breaks the showdown rules, by the way, but nobody really cares at this point. Teagle says that his durable Wetzoig is the only thing he's proud of. Its thick armor has never been smashed once, and not even the champion can break it. Suddenly, Teagle's Wetzoig bursts into flames as he pushes it to the limit, crushing Jashigan against the wall. The champion tells him to stop, but he won't. Teagle closes his eyes and says he's glad he didn't quit Motorball, and that he stuck around and got to fight the champion at the very end. Teagle explodes. much to Alita's shock, but she doesn't have the time for much else as the champion staggers through the flames. She flies into an attack, landing blow after blow on Jashigan. Up in the stands, another person in front of Ito starts cheering for Alita to kill Jashigan. He raises his remaining wine bottle, reconsiders, and hits the man with a length of pipe instead. Jashigan is deteriorating at an alarming rate. He doesn't have any sense of his arms, and his sense of his whole body is disintegrating as his brain dies. Rambling, he demands a body. Alita sends the champion flying with a double palm strike to the chest, causing Jashigan to cough up blood. As he flies through the flames, he catches sight of the good luck charm Shumira gave him, and thinks of his sister. He grabs the charm and stands, wreathed in flame, and standing with all the power of his will given form. Alita is confused. Her last attack should have destroyed the motors in his artificial heart. He shouldn't be able to stand. Her old Meister chimes in to offer some explanation for how he stands here, seemingly as flesh and blood, at least in this hallucinatory realm. He asks, what is the ultimate technique they seek to gain through the height of their discipline? When, in their mechanical forms, they regain the unified senses of their earthly bodies, the very universe resides inside them, giving form to the Ars Magna, the great art. This, Jashigan has achieved, if only for a moment. Alita attacks, but Jashigan's fist flies under her guard faster than she can react, and all but punches her in half. She has lost, totally and utterly. When she regains awareness, Umba is fussing over her, and fire control crews are on the track. Umba congratulates her for a great fight, but she just wants to know where Jashigan is. She looks and wonders if what she saw was an illusion. Alita smiles, saying that great blow woke her up, thanking Jashigan. His dead body still stands, covered in fire-retardant foam, but standing tall on the track. In the stands, Ito raises a glass to Alita's safe return and the man who became a god. Well, that was quite something. This arc definitely gets better in the second half, and I love the ending. Just to clear something up, I don't think Jashigan actually manifested a new flesh and blood body out of thin air that punched through Alita at the end there. From what Alita's old master described, I think he reached some sort of momentary mental and spiritual peak through sheer force of will, attaining basically the ultimate key, the ultimate concentration and control of his body to take the right movement at the right time. So just before he died, and being reminded of what he was fighting for, he was able to execute a final perfect move, moving through sheer force of will, and achieved victory, securing his legacy as the undefeated champion. As to what Alita saw, well, she was hallucinating through most of that last fight. In a way, she saw the truth of what Jashigan experienced, Ars Magna, just not what physically happened. Now, to revisit my mixed feelings about this arc, I've concluded it's mostly the start that I think is weak. When we see Alita and Ito here, we see them at their most inconsistent. Motivations shift with only vague explanation or acknowledgement. In Alita's case, this happens between each chapter for a little while. First, she's playing Motorball to escape from her past and lose herself in the fight. Then in the very next chapter, she's talking about fighting to try to figure out who she is and regain her lost memories. In the next chapter after that, she's suddenly really invested in fighting Jashigan for seemingly no other reason than Ito provoking her. After that, she starts saying she's happy purely to have something to fight for, which is just fighting Jashigan for its own sake. There really aren't any stakes throughout this arc, and Alita's reasons for fighting are thin. This seems to be the point the author is going for, granted, as realizing Motorball doesn't have much for her is the conclusion she comes to, but it does leave one wondering what the point of all this was. The start of her characterization is also very jarring, with her very cold and harsh attitude toward Ito, which feels downright out of character when you come to this straight off the previous arc. I can sort of see how she might become that way, considering how the previous arc ended, but it requires a little more explanation. I kept waiting for some flashback with Alita meeting Ed that would help bridge those versions of the character, but it never came. That being said, I thought that Alita's reconciliation with Ito was genuinely sweet, and her realization of how selfish she's been behaving was well handled. By the end, Alita has learned things about who she is as a person and her Martian past, coming out the other end more confident in her identity and a more balanced person, neither as naive as she was before Yugo's death, nor as cold as she was at the start of the story. I do think she has an arc here. The first half of it is just hard to follow and frustrating. Ito's problem is mostly just that his regression and behavior are very obnoxious, with somewhat flimsy justification. Yes, Alita looked at him like an insect when he finally found her, but then that inconsistent pettiness and possessiveness took over him just long enough to provoke Alita into challenging Jashigan. Then it never came up again until he reconciles with Alita. Now, I should be fair, there is an arc here of Jashigan talking to Ito about the importance of family that makes him come to his senses. I like that part. But it's really his sudden attitude change at the start that makes it seem like he's gone temporarily insane. It just doesn't feel organic at all. Motorball itself is really a matter of personal taste. I actually think it lends itself to some of the most creative and dynamic action sequences in the entire series, but they do tend to drag on a while at times. If you enjoy Motorball sequences, you'll probably enjoy this arc well enough, but if not, then it'll be a slog. I've been trying to think of it in comparison to tournament arcs in other works, and I think there are some weaknesses worth pointing out on that front. Tournament arcs typically offer a wide range of new characters with strong personalities and creative designs, each of which brings a novel challenge that the protagonist has to overcome. Motorball delivers on that in terms of designs and combat, but with few exceptions, many of the Motorball characters are pretty thin, and we don't learn about their motivations beyond living and breathing for Motorball. Maybe if there was some brief team-building episode before the battle with Jashigan, that would have helped that. But then again, the author apparently just wanted those characters to be instantly obliterated to show how strong Jashigan is, so maybe he didn't think it was worth the time. Some characters, like Ed and Idacati, do have satisfying characterization in arcs, showing the mindset of people that have sunk their body and souls into Motorball. Shumira is a bit weird. She speaks in the third person and seems coded as mentally handicapped or just being very young, despite that shower scene. And this arc literally opens on a scene of her about to be raped in an alley, so I don't really understand what the author's intentions with Shumira really were, to be honest. At times, it seems like she's being framed as a potential love interest for Ito, which, thankfully, is not something the series takes further than a one-sided crush. It just feels weird with how she's characterized, combined with the screwed-up situations around her that she has no real reaction to, like she doesn't comprehend the world around her. I just feel confused about the intent with her. I've heard from other people that they also find Shumira either annoying or off-putting, so I don't think it's just me. Shumira's most clear narrative purpose, though, is mostly as Jashigan's humanizing relationship. Jashigan himself is easily the strongest character in this arc. This is the first time Alita has gone up against a truly worthy opponent, someone that she respects as a warrior, someone who has a fierce desire for victory, but does not shy away from challenge, who acknowledges Alita's own power and will. The final encounter feels a bit strange because you realize Alita has no particular stakes or a reason to fight Jashigan, except a vague notion of self-discovery. On the other hand, the champion is literally dying and putting his entire legacy on the line. While Alita is still trying to figure out who she is, he's decided who he wants to be and what he wants his life to mean for the sister he's leaving behind. Showing that resolve to Alita plays a big part in her journey. Losing this fight makes it one of the most impactful fights in the series as far as her character is concerned. Alita comes out of this with immense respect for Jashigan, who she'll remember for many arcs on from now for his resolve and the intensity of his willpower. There's even a side story set after this that shows Alita has put up a poster of Jashigan in her bedroom. I think I've gone on long enough, though. To sum things up, though it does come together in the end, I would still call this the weakest story arc in the series. The first half is still a slog to get through, and there's a bit of a quantity over quality problem with all the side characters that make the action drag at times. Jashigan may be the undefeated champion, but even he can't completely salvage this. Thankfully, the next story arc is a big improvement in my book, so please look for my next video on the Zapan arc.